So what I thought I would do is start with a little bit about my bio because it's actually relevant to the subject matter. I started off when I was 13, and so I am definitely one of those lucky people that knew what I wanted to do I wanted to be a photographer from early teens. My grandmother and my mother were photographers for fun, and so that was kind of our bonding activity. And so I grew up on a farm. I didn't do farm work. I drove the tractor sometimes, but not usually. And now I live in New York City, which I think I fit a little bit better. But anyway, so I grew up in upstate New York, and so we would go out and we would take pictures together. And so instantly photography became something that was important to me just because it was a connection with my mother and my grandmother, and it was just close to my heart immediately. But then I started out doing nature photography, and you know what? I was like, this is what I want to be my career. I know it, so why not start right now? So I started when I was 15, started my business, and I was photographing upperclassmen in high school. So what I would do is I would go to the upperclassmen with my little postcards and say, you know, pick me for your senior portraits. And so that's where it started. Question I always get is I did actually go to school for photography. I went to Syracuse University, and I had a degree in photography, business, and political science. Really, I mean, yes, you know, photography, that was fun, but I had been doing it a long time at that point. The business was the most important part. So for anybody out there who maybe feels a little discouraged because, okay, well, I didn't go to school for photography, how do I learn this? I sincerely don't feel that you have to at all. You can be an extremely successful photographer and have never gone to school. But what you're doing right now, especially if you're watching online, that's what you need to be doing. You figure out where your weaknesses are, where your strengths are, the direction you want to go, and seek out education to fulfill the knowledge that you need to have. So what you're doing is spot on. And so I'm hoping that everybody will feel kind of empowered for creating images, and if you're an aspiring professional, maybe making it a profession, or really just making better photographs. So I went to Syracuse after college. This is where it relates to this subject matter. After college, and kind of my senior year, I took a fashion photography course. And so I took my first fashion photo. And it just fit, because in fashion photography, there aren't any rules. I can do whatever I want. If I want a girl in a giant wig with rain in the foreground, looking sad, and there's fog, I can. I mean, there's no rules, so I can do literally whatever I want. So after college, I moved to London, did fashion photography for 2 years, and then my visa expired, and so I came back. And I needed to save up to be able to move to New York City, become a New York City fashion photographer. So I opened a portrait studio in upstate New York, and I did senior portraits and weddings and children and a little bit of everything. And so I did what I thought was supposed to be portrait photography. So I photographed the little kids on the white background, and I photographed the brides in the traditional poses in front of the churches. And I did senior portraits on the black background with the black drape. And so I did what I thought was portrait photography. But on the side, I knew, okay, I want to be a New York City fashion photographer. So what I was doing is I have my portrait business over here, and I was doing okay. It was fine. I was doing all right as a business. But then on the side, I was doing my fashion photography. So I was putting together shoots with hair and makeup and wardrobe, and we'd go to cool locations. I'd have great lighting, and I'd put together a whole team, and I'd have really profound concepts. And I was building my career, and then I'd go shoot the kids on the plain background, you know, in their clothing, and shoot that. And then I would shoot the bride in front. So I had these two separate worlds. But all of a sudden, they started to cross. And so I started taking those concepts of fashion photography and saying to the bride, you know what, let's do a shoot before your wedding, and let's go to a waterfall, and let's do some beautiful hair and makeup. Let's do something with props. Or I would say to the children, okay, let's pick a theme. What would you like to dress up as? Where would you like to go? And so senior portraits, let's get hair and makeup. Let's get wardrobe. Let's have an idea behind it. And all of a sudden, I went from being okay as a studio to really successful, and from being happy with my images to thrilled, and being fulfilled as an artist. Because originally, I'm sure a lot of you have had this. When you're making money as photography, you're doing it to make money, and you have people coming in, and you're shooting it, and you still love it, but sometimes you know what's expected, or you just kind of get in the flow of things, and you just do what's working. And so then you don't push yourself creatively, and you kind of get in a rut. At least that's where I felt. So what I ended up doing is I ended up taking all those concepts I had in fashion photography and applying them to my portrait and wedding work. And my images just got so much better, and I was able to stand out from my competition. Before, I was competing against every other studio in my area, every other photographer, everybody with a camera, really, because I wasn't offering something above and beyond. And then all of a sudden, if you wanted something different, if you wanted something with a really cool effect, or if you wanted something where you'd go in a location with cool hair, makeup, and wardrobe, you had to go to Lindsay Adler. So that is where I came up with the concept for the book and for what I teach, which is fashion flair for portrait and wedding photography. Slight disclaimer, it's not a major disclaimer, but right now I work as a New York City fashion photographer. So in about since I wrote the book, I transitioned from doing portraits to I only do fashion now. So I still can easily give advice for what worked for my studio on how I implemented these techniques for marketing, for reaching new clientele, how I pitched it to my clients, what I charged, all of that. But now I am a commercial and portrait photographer in New York, so I shoot for magazines, I shoot ad campaigns, I shoot things for makeup. I shoot what a fashion photographer does. So right now, I am not in that world exactly, but depending on the clients, I still will shoot some weddings, and I still do a lot of portraits. Just to give you an example, one of my big clients is the WNBA. So I photograph a lot of professional women athletes. Now, so they come to you for a portrait, right? So let's imagine that a basketball player, a female basketball player comes to you as a portrait. I want a picture of me showing me as a woman and a basketball player. If you think inside of the box, you think of a woman with her basketball in her jersey, right? That's the shot that she wanted. Well, what happens when they come to my studio is we do hair, and we do makeup, and we do wardrobe. And I have them, and you'll see the shot later, so that they look like a model with a basketball. And so I'm showing them as strong, beautiful, powerful women with that fashion flair, but it's also a portrait that serves them as well. So all that stuff that I did before, I still do. And a little secret, fashion photography, okay, so Vogue. Guys, look at Vogue. In the back, you have maybe it's like 10, 15 images all on a theme. Those are called fashion editorials, and they're in, all the fashion magazines. The secret that people don't know is those pay almost nothing. Even for Vogue magazine, it pays a day rate of a few hundred, 300, 600, something like that, because it's treated as your opportunity to advertise yourself. The reason I'm saying this is relevant is the money is in the advertising and in those commercial portraits. So everything that I learned in that crossover, everything I learned from being a portrait photographer crosses over into being a fashion photographer. Everything from fashion photography crosses over into portraits. So that is a little bit about my background, so you can get an idea of the type of questions I can answer. I will say if you do have questions related to how to become a fashion photographer, that's not what I'm teaching in this course. Maybe Creative Live will bring me back another time. Let's but keep the questions more towards if you're a portrait, wedding, baby, boudoir, whatever type of photography you do, keep it to that and how you can take the concepts and apply it to your work. So the question that I ask is not how does a portrait photographer approach portrait photography? We already know that. But instead, how would a fashion photographer do it? And a little thing I'd like to say as well, there's nothing wrong with traditional portraiture. The reason that I have a problem with it is if you do traditional portraiture, and you do, and you do, and you do, and I do, how do I stand out? It's hard. I guarantee if I do portraits the way everyone else does, someone's doing it better. Somebody is. Somebody's had more experience, more years, maybe they're better interacting with the client, so I need to find some way to stand out. So for a fashion photographer approaching portrait and wedding photography, maybe it's the lighting, the fact that they pick a certain time of day, or you put on a certain outfit, or the fact that you leave the studio, or you go outside of the kind of confines of traditional portrait and do something different. Or maybe it's cool props and interesting poses. Maybe it's a little bit a different composition than you would see in traditional portraits. Or maybe it's going to be a little bit more intimate posing. For example, and I'll get into this more, the picture on the left that is a bridal portrait, I picked the pose right out of a fashion magazine. So I'm picking something that's a little more sensual than the traditional poses that you would see. Or maybe it's an image that doesn't really feel quite like a portrait, but it's telling a story. And for me, storytelling is essential to what I do. When I shoot a fashion editorial, I'm telling a story. When I shoot an engagement session for a client, I'm telling a story for them. So storytelling we'll focus on a lot as we talk. Or maybe it's just something that feels cinematic and it brings everything together. It's the lighting, it's the location, it's the pose, it's the styling. So a fashion photographer will just take those things into consideration. I never do a shoot where I tell the client, okay, wear a solid color shirt and show up. something like that. We're always discussing a little bit more. A couple years ago, maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago when I was doing senior portraits, it was really in to wear skin-tight zebra print. And so, I mean, I had like 4 girls show up in that. And so I realized when I took control, my images were a whole lot better. So for me, anybody can take that pretty picture. Anybody can take that traditional portrait image, but what makes you different? What's going to allow you to stand out from the crowd? And so that's what I focus on today. It's not just your techniques. It's not like, okay, so take a look at this picture. The technique for how I did this, it's not difficult. I have 2 lights on the background, 1 on her. It's not a difficult technique, but it's the idea behind it. It's the idea that I went for all white skin and red hair. So what I encourage you to do is remember that it's not all about the techniques, it's not all about the technicals, the camera, the equipment, the lighting. It's about the ideas that you have. And a lot of times when I look at fashion magazines, there's so many photographers that are so talented. What makes an advertiser pick one over the other? It's their ideas, a lot of the time. The age of Facebook has played an important role into this concept of fashion flair for me. I'll just put it bluntly, I can play to people's vanity. Because in the past, maybe if I photograph a high school senior, they'll maybe pass out some wallets to friends and then grandma and grandpa see it. But now I can say to them, you know, when they're calling up and I'm trying to book that client, I'll say, you know what, I have a great idea for a shoot for you. Cannot wait until all your friends see it on Facebook. And that's what they get excited about. Because it's not just the friends and the family that they choose to give the images to, or the ones that are on the wall, or the ones that grandma have. It's everybody they know. And I don't know about you, but Facebook friendship is a very casual thing nowadays. I meet you and I Facebook friend you. So it's a really large audience and they're trying to make an impression. So I appeal to that. Same thing with a bride and groom. The wedding album, you had your wedding album, went on the shelf. Now everybody can see how absolutely gorgeous you looked on your wedding day. Let's pick a theme. Let's do a vintage bridal session and do something. People are going to be stunned at how amazing it is. So I'm pitching that to them as well. And I'm keeping in mind that the audience isn't just their immediate friends and family. Why fashion photography? For me, all right, how many people watch or have watched America's Next Top Model? Or, so every hand in this room. How about Project Runway? So I actually don't have a TV, confession, just so you know. Maybe after Creative Live I'll get one. I'm debating. We'll see. We'll see about that. But people are watching shows like this, and there's a reason that people watch it. They love that fantasy. They love seeing the behind the scenes and kind of being part of that process. So that's one thing I can pitch to them, is you can look and feel like a model, or you can put together a concept shoot like you might see on America's Next Top Model. I'm appealing to that audience that are exposed to that type of media. So the other thing, how many clients truly want to look exactly like they look in their photos? I mean, you get the questions like, oh, can you fix the bags under the eyes? Can you make me skinnier? Because people want a bit of fantasy. So what I do is I push it and I make the fantasy even further, clothing that they might not wear. I try to do hair and makeup that might be a little different. I embrace the people's desires to play dress up, as children or as adults. It's great for me because all the time on my shoots, my job as an adult is to play dress up. I dress other people up and take pictures. So it's pretty cool. Although I didn't play dress up too much as a child, so maybe that's why it's coming out now, probably. Another reason, just to put it bluntly, the more production that you're doing into a shoot, you can demand higher profits. So for me, I didn't want to be the Walmart or the studio where people have walk-ins, I shoot a few headshots, I try to sell prints inexpensively. Instead, I'd rather do 1 shoot a day or 2 shoots a day, or me right now, I only do about 2 shoots a week because it's big productions. But as a portrait photographer, maybe just 1 or 2 a day and have a bit more of a production, but be proud of my images, my brand, and then charge a lot more for it. And so I can kind of pour my heart and soul into that. So that was kind of my decision. Here's the thing. If you watch this class and you think, okay, no way. I am not doing hair and makeup for every shoot. I am not doing wardrobe for every shoot. We're not going on location for every shoot. I'm not going to do crazy retouching for every shoot. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I recommend you consider is either 1, use the techniques that I teach to create a buzz around your studio and around your work. So maybe you don't do all these big productions, but you do a couple. So let's say you are a senior portrait photographer. You pick those select students, your senior reps, and you do something that's themed fashion flair. So you go on location, you have hair, makeup, and wardrobe, and so you get people talking and you get people excited. You can do that just to create a buzz, and then, you know what, not do it again. Or you put it on your webpage just to get people excited at the possibilities of what they could do. A tip that I would have is if you have, and this is very common for marketing, if you have a lot of pictures of babies on your website, and you hate photographing babies, and you only want to photograph weddings, you have to have pictures of weddings on your site. So if you don't want to photograph girls simply in the black drape in front of the black background, you can have a shot or two on your website, but maybe have the type of work you would like to shoot on your website. Therefore, people understand the possibilities. So if you would much rather be shooting at sunset with hair blowing in the wind and big, beautiful dresses, clients aren't going to ask you to do that if you don't have those type of images up on your website. So for the longest time, I would just photograph friends and family to put together these shoots, so I could say to a client, oh, did you see that one image on my site? If you want to do something like that, we can schedule an evening session and get hair and makeup. So keep that in mind. It just gets people thinking in the right mindset. And then secondly, you can offer specialty services. So maybe you have your basic package, but after a certain point, you have your fashion flair package or your stylized package or whatever you want to call it. So it can be something totally separate. Or maybe if somebody agrees to a certain value of a package, after that point, they have the ability to have a stylized session or go on location. So there are so many different directions you have to take this. Don't feel that everything needs to be a big production. As a fashion photographer, the reason I only do 1 or 2 shoots a week is because my whole week is planning my shoots. I have big productions. Sometimes it's 20 people on set if it's kind of a video production. So you don't need to go that route. You can just take what fits for you and just apply it so that you have imagery that helps you stand out from the competition.